The beam cracked like a gunshot. Lucas Hale didn't move. He'd heard that sound before. It meant the structure was done fighting. Around him, the barn groaned, a dying thing held together by rust and stubbornness. 30 days to save it. 30 days before the bank swept in and erased everything. He should have walked away the second he saw the foundation sinking into the mountain soil. But Elena Carter stood in the doorway with dirt on her hands and her father's legacy crumbling behind her, and something in her eyes wouldn't let him leave. This is their story, a battle against time, corruption, and a system built to crush people like them. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments and hit that like button. I want to see how far this story travels. Lucas Hale didn't take jobs he couldn't finish. That was the rule. It had been the rule for 8 years, ever since he'd stopped building other people's dreams and started protecting his own. He worked alone, kept his head down, and never got involved in projects that smelled like desperation. Desperation made people sloppy. It made them take risks they couldn't afford. And this barn reeked of desperation. He stood at the base of the mountain access road, staring up at the structure through the windshield of his truck. Even from a quarter-mile away, he could see the problem. The ridgeline sagged like a broken spine. The walls leaned inward, surrendering to gravity. The whole thing looked like it was holding its breath, waiting for the final gust of wind to finish what time had started. His phone buzzed on the dashboard, another missed call from the same number that had been trying him for 3 days. He ignored it. Lily's voice cut through the cab from the back seat. "Are we going up there?" Lucas glanced in the rearview mirror. His daughter sat with her backpack on her lap, watching him with the kind of patience that only 8-year-olds who'd learned not to push their luck possessed. "Not we," Lucas said. "You're staying with Mrs. Vega." "You said I could come see the barn." "I said maybe." "That's basically yes." "It's basically we'll see," Lily sighed, the sound too world-weary for someone who still had milk teeth. "You always say that when you mean no." Lucas shifted the truck into gear and started up the access road. The gravel crunched under the tires, and the incline forced the engine to work harder. He didn't answer her because she was right. He did say that, and he did mean no. The road switched back twice before opening into a clearing. The barn sat in the center of it like a monument to bad decisions. Up close, it was worse than he'd thought. The foundation had shifted, not enough to collapse the structure outright, but enough to put stress fractures through every load-bearing wall. The roof had more holes than shingles. The main door hung from one hinge, swaying slightly in the breeze. Lucas killed the engine and sat there for a moment, hands still on the wheel. "It looks sad," Lily said. He turned to look at her. "What?" "The barn. It looks sad." Lucas had no idea how to respond to that, so he didn't. He climbed out of the truck and told Lily to stay put. She nodded, already pulling a book from her backpack. The ground around the barn was soft. Too soft. Lucas knelt and pressed his palm into the soil. It gave easily, still waterlogged from the spring runoff. That explained the foundation shift. The whole structure was built on land that moved with the seasons. Whoever had put it here either didn't know what they were doing or didn't care. "You Lucas Hale?" The voice came from behind him. Lucas stood and turned. The woman walking toward him from the tree line was probably in her early 30s, though the exhaustion in her face added years. She wore work jeans and a flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled up, dirt caked under her fingernails. Her dark hair was pulled back in a braid that had come half undone. She moved like someone who'd been awake too long and knew she had further to go. "I'm Elena Carter," she said, stopping a few feet away. "Thanks for coming." Lucas didn't shake her hand. He gestured at the barn. "You're wasting your time." Elena didn't flinch. "Probably." "I'm serious. This thing's done." "I know." "The foundation's compromised. The walls are torqued. The roof's shot. Even if I could stabilize it, you're looking at a full rebuild. That's not a repair job. That's starting over." "Okay," Lucas frowned. "You understand what I'm saying? This isn't something you fix in a weekend. This is months of work, tens of thousands of dollars, and there's no guarantee it'll hold when we're done." Elena crossed her arms. "Are you trying to talk me out of hiring you, or are you just always this encouraging?" "I'm trying to save you from throwing money into a hole." "Noted." She walked past him toward the barn. "You coming or not?" Lucas watched her go, annoyed. He glanced back at his truck. Lily had her nose buried in her book, oblivious to the world. He could leave right now. Get back on the road, drop Lily at Mrs. Vega's, and take a job that made sense. He had 3 other offers waiting. All of them straightforward. All of them profitable. But he followed Elena anyway. Inside, the barn was worse. The air smelled like rot and rust. Sunlight poured through gaps in the roof, illuminating columns of dust. The floor was warped, buckling in places where water had pooled and frozen and thawed too many times. A few pieces of old equipment sat in the corners, half buried under debris. Elena stood in the center of it all, hands on her hips, looking up at the ceiling. "My dad built this," she said, 30 years ago. Did most of it himself. Lucas ran his hand along one of the support beams. The wood was soft, riddled with rot. He shouldn't have. Yeah, well, he didn't have a lot of options. There's always options. Elena turned to face him. You ever been in a position where every option is a bad one, so you just pick the one that lets you keep moving? Lucas didn't answer. He knew exactly what that felt like. He built this barn so he'd have a place to work, Elena continued. He was a carpenter. Not a great one, but good enough. He made furniture, fixed things for people. Nothing fancy, but it was his. This place was his. And now it's yours. And now it's mine. She walked to the far wall where a set of shelves still stood intact. She picked up a wooden box from the top shelf and opened it. Inside were a handful of tools, chisels, a hand plane, a measuring tape so old the numbers had worn off. He died 2 years ago, Elena said quietly. Left me this place and about $15,000 in debt. I've been working 3 jobs trying to keep it, barely managing. And now the bank's calling in the loan. Lucas knew where this was going. When? 30 days. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. 30 days. You're kidding. I wish I was. You can't rebuild this in 30 days. Then I'll lose it. Lucas shook his head and started toward the door. I can't help you. Wait. He stopped but didn't turn around. I'm not asking you to do the impossible, Elena said. I'm asking you to try. That's it. Just try. If we can't make it work, fine. At least I'll know I did everything I could. That's not how construction works. You can't just try. You either do it right or you don't do it at all. Then do it right. Lucas turned to face her. In 30 days. In 30 days? He studied her face. She wasn't begging. She wasn't pleading. She was just standing there, holding her father's tools, waiting for his answer. And something about that, about the way she refused to collapse under the weight of it all, made him pause. Why me? Lucas asked. There are other builders. I called 12, Elena said. You're the only one who showed up. That figured. Nobody wanted a job like this. Too much risk, not enough reward. It was a guaranteed disaster, which was exactly why Lucas should have walked away. I've got conditions, he said instead. Elena straightened. Okay. First, I work alone. I don't do crews. You want to help? Fine, but you follow my lead. No arguments. Done. Second, if at any point I say it's not safe, we stop. I'm not dying for a barn. Fair. Third, you pay for materials up front. I'm not fronting costs on a job that might not finish. Elena hesitated. I don't have a lot of cash. Then we'll keep it minimal. Salvage what we can, buy what we have to. She nodded slowly. Anything else? Lucas glanced back at the barn, then at her. Yeah, don't get your hopes up. The first 3 days were spent just assessing the damage. Lucas brought Lily with him after school, setting her up with her homework at a folding table outside while he worked. She didn't complain. She never did. She'd learned a long time ago that her dad's work came first, and complaining didn't change that. Elena showed up every day at dawn and stayed until dark. She didn't talk much, but she watched everything Lucas did, asking questions when she didn't understand. She was a fast learner. By the end of the second day, she was handing him tools before he asked for them. The foundation was the biggest problem. Lucas spent an entire day digging around the perimeter, exposing the old concrete footings. They'd cracked in a dozen places, and the soil underneath had eroded, leaving gaps. He'd have to pour new footings, which meant excavation, rebar, concrete forms, work that would eat up a week on its own. Can we skip it? Elena asked, kneeling beside him as he measured the gap under the northeast corner. No. What if we just reinforce what's there? It won't hold. How do you know? Lucas looked up at her. Because I've been doing this for 20 years and I know what holds and what doesn't. Elena sat back on her heels. Sorry, I'm not trying to second-guess you. Yeah, you are, but it's fine. It's your barn. He stood, brushing dirt off his jeans. Look, if we're going to do this, you need to trust me. I'm not here to take shortcuts. I'm here to do it right. That's the only way it works. Elena nodded. Okay. That night, after Lily was asleep, Lucas sat at his kitchen table with a notebook and a calculator, running the numbers. Materials alone were going to cost more than Elena probably had. Labor, even just his time, would push it higher. And that was assuming nothing went wrong. Which it would. It always did. He should have said no, but he kept thinking about the way Elena had stood in that barn, holding her father's tools, refusing to give up. There was something in that, something he recognized, something he'd lost a long time ago. By the end of the first week, they'd excavated the foundation and poured the first set of footings. It was backbreaking work. Lucas's hands were raw, his back screaming. Elena wasn't in much better shape, but she didn't complain. She just kept moving. Lily brought them water during breaks, solemn and watchful. She didn't ask when they'd be done. She didn't ask if they'd make it. She just sat on the tailgate of the truck, swinging her legs, and waited. On the 8th day, the inspector showed up. Lucas was in the middle of setting rebar when a truck pulled into the clearing. A man in his 50s climbed out, clipboard in hand, looking around with the kind of lazy arrogance that set Lucas's teeth on edge. You the contractor? The man asked. Lucas straightened. Yeah. Ray Donner, county inspector. He walked over to the foundation trench and peered down. This permitted? It's a repair. Looks like new construction to me. It's a repair, Lucas repeated. Foundation replacement. Doesn't require a permit under county code. Donner smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. We'll see about that. We'll see about... He spent the next 20 minutes poking around, taking notes, asking questions that had nothing to do with the work. Elena stood off to the side, arms crossed, watching him with barely concealed hostility. Finally, Donner turned to Lucas. I'll need to see your contractor's license. Lucas pulled his wallet from his pocket and handed over the card. Donner studied it, then handed it back. You're out of Jefferson County, Donner said. So? So this is Harlan County? You need a local permit to work here. Since when? Since always. Lucas kept his expression neutral. That's not in the code. Maybe you should read the code again. Elena stepped forward. This is harassment. Donner turned to her, still smiling. Ma'am, I'm just doing my job. Your job is to make sure the work is safe, not to invent rules. Careful, Ms. Carter. Hostility toward county officials can affect your permits. What permits? Elena shot back. You just said we don't have the right ones. Donner clicked his pen and made a note on his clipboard. I'll be back in a week. Make sure everything's in order. He left without another word. Lucas watched the truck disappear down the access road, his jaw tight. He's going to shut us down, Elena said quietly. Maybe. What do we do? Lucas turned to look at the barn, the exposed foundation, the piles of lumber waiting to be cut. 30 days had just become 22, and now they had an inspector actively working against them. He should have walked away, but instead he picked up his hammer. We keep working. The next 2 weeks blurred together. Lucas and Elena worked 14-hour days, starting before dawn and finishing long after dark. They rebuilt the foundation, poured the floor, and began raising the walls. Every board had to be measured twice, cut once. Every joint had to be perfect. There was no room for error. Lily started spending more time at the site. Mrs. Vega could only watch her so many hours, and Lucas didn't have anywhere else to put her. She did her homework on the tailgate, helped carry tools, and sat quietly when the adults were too tired to talk. Elena brought food most days, sandwiches, soup, things that could be eaten quickly without stopping work. She didn't say much, but her presence was steady, constant. Lucas found himself relying on it more than he wanted to admit. One night, as they were packing up, Elena broke the silence. Why'd you say yes? she asked. Lucas looked up from coiling an extension cord. What? To this job. You knew it was a disaster. Why'd you take it? He didn't answer right away. He finished coiling the cord, hung it on the truck, and wiped his hands on his jeans. I don't know, he said finally. That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got. Elena studied him for a moment, then nodded. Fair enough. They worked in silence after that, loading tools into the truck. Lily was already asleep in the back seat, curled up with her jacket as a pillow. As Lucas climbed into the driver's seat, Elena tapped on the window. He rolled it down. Thank you, she said. For what? For showing up. Lucas didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded and drove away. By the end of the third week, the walls were up and the roof framing was in place. They were behind schedule, but not impossibly so. If they could finish the roof and pass inspection, there was a chance, slim but real, that Elena could keep the land. And then Ray Donner came back. He showed up on a Tuesday morning, unannounced, with another man Lucas didn't recognize. They walked around the site, taking pictures, making notes, conferring in low voices. Lucas and Elena kept working, but the tension was thick enough to cut. Finally, Donner approached. This doesn't meet code, he said. Lucas set down his drill. What doesn't? All of it. Be specific. Donner gestured vaguely at the structure. The framing's not up to standard. The foundation's insufficient. The materials are subpar. That's a lie. Excuse me? Lucas stepped closer. I said that's a lie. Every joint in this building exceeds code. The foundation is overbuilt. The materials are grade A. You want to fail us? Fine, but don't insult me by pretending it's about safety. Donner's smile didn't waver. I don't like your tone, Mr. Hale. And I don't like inspectors who take bribes. The smile vanished. You want to repeat that? You heard me? For a moment, Lucas thought Donner might take a swing at him, but the man just turned to Elena. You've got until the end of the month, he said. If this building isn't up to code by then, I'm condemning it. He left. Elena waited until the truck was out of sight before she spoke. What just happened? Lucas exhaled slowly. We just made an enemy. He was already our enemy. Yeah, but now he knows we're not backing down. Elena looked at the barn, then back at Lucas. Can we finish in time? Lucas didn't answer, because he didn't know. And for the first time since he'd taken the job, he wasn't sure they could win. That night, Lucas couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, running through the timeline in his head. 8 days left. The roof still needed shingles. The electrical had to be run. The plumbing roughed in. The siding finished. It was doable technically, but only if nothing went wrong, and something always went wrong. He thought about Elena, working herself to exhaustion to save a barn that might not even matter. He thought about Lily, sitting on the tailgate, watching her father disappear into someone else's fight. He thought about the life he'd built, small, controlled, safe, and how this job was threatening all of it. He should have walked away. But when morning came, he got up, made breakfast for Lily, and drove back to the mountain. Because some things were worth the risk, and maybe, just maybe, this was one of them. The shingles arrived 2 days late. Lucas stood in the clearing, phone pressed to his ear, listening to the supplier apologize for the third time. Behind him, Elena was running electrical wire through the interior walls, moving with the kind of mechanical efficiency that came from exhaustion. They'd lost 48 hours they couldn't afford to lose. I don't care about your logistics, Lucas said into the phone. I care about my roof. When can you get them here? Tomorrow morning. First thing. That's what you said yesterday. I know, Mr. Hale, and I apologize, but Lucas hung up. He stood there for a moment, staring at the half-finished roof, calculating how much time they'd need once the materials actually showed up. 2 days to lay the shingles. Another day for flashing and ridge caps. That put them at 5 days before inspection, assuming nothing else went wrong. Problem? Elena called from inside the barn. Lucas walked through the doorway. She was on a ladder, feeding wire through a hole she'd drilled in the header beam. Her shirt was soaked with sweat despite the cool mountain air. Shingles are delayed again, he said. Elena didn't look down. How long? They say tomorrow. You believe them? No? She finished threading the wire and climbed down the ladder. Her hands were shaking slightly, fatigue, not fear. Lucas had seen it before. She was running on empty. "We need to talk about a backup plan," he said. "There is no backup plan." "Elena, I'm serious." She set the wire cutters on the makeshift workbench they'd built from sawhorses and plywood. "If we don't finish, I lose everything. There's no plan B. This is it." Lucas watched her wipe her forehead with the back of her hand, leaving a streak of dust across her temple. She looked like she'd aged 5 years in 3 weeks. "You need to sleep," he said. "I'll sleep when it's done." "You're going to collapse." "Then I collapse." She picked up the wire cutters again. "You want to lecture me or you want to help?" Lucas didn't answer. He grabbed his drill and went back to work. The truth was, he wasn't in much better shape. His back screamed every time he bent over. His hands were a mess of cuts and calluses. He'd been running on coffee and stubbornness for days. But unlike Elena, he knew when to stop. He'd learned that lesson the hard way, years ago, in a different life. He thought about telling her that. Thought about explaining that pushing yourself past the breaking point didn't make you stronger. It just made you broken. But she wouldn't listen. He could see it in the set of her jaw, the way she moved like stopping would be the same as surrender. So he kept his mouth shut and worked. Lily showed up after school with her backpack and a thermos of soup that Mrs. Vega had sent. She handed it to Lucas without a word, then climbed into the truck bed and pulled out her homework. "You okay, kid?" Lucas asked. Lily looked up at him. "Are you?" The question caught him off guard. He didn't know how to answer it. "I'm fine," he said finally. "You don't look fine." "Well, I am." Lily studied him for a moment, then went back to her homework. She'd stopped believing him a long time ago, but she'd also stopped arguing. That was worse somehow. The arguing meant she still had hope that things could change. Elena emerged from the barn, saw Lily, and waved. Lily waved back. "She's here a lot," Elena said, walking over to where Lucas stood. "Yeah. That okay with you?" Lucas shrugged. "Don't have a choice. You could have said no to the job." "Could have." Elena leaned against the truck. "Why didn't you?" It was the second time she'd asked, and he still didn't have an answer that made sense. "I don't know," he said. "Maybe I'm just stupid." "You're not stupid." "Then what am I?" Elena looked at him for a long moment. "Someone who shows up." Lucas didn't know what to say to that, so he unscrewed the cap on the thermos and drank. The soup was still hot, and it burned going down, but it felt good. Real. The shingles didn't arrive the next morning. They didn't arrive that afternoon either. By evening, Lucas was ready to drive to the supplier himself and load the truck at gunpoint. Elena sat on the barn floor, knees pulled to her chest, staring at nothing. They'd spent the day finishing the electrical and plumbing rough-ins, work they could have done later if they had the roof completed. But the roof was the priority, and without materials they were dead in the water. "We could use metal," Elena said quietly. Lucas looked over at her. "What?" "Metal roofing. It's faster to install than shingles. We could get it same day from the hardware store in Millbrook. It's more expensive." "I don't care." "You should care. You're already underwater on this." Elena stood up, brushing dust off her jeans. "I'll figure it out. Money doesn't matter if I lose the land anyway." Lucas wanted to argue, but she was right. At this point, cost was secondary to time, and metal roofing would cut their timeline by at least a day. "I'll call them," he said. The metal panels arrived the next morning in the back of a flatbed truck. Lucas and Elena spent 2 hours unloading them, stacking them carefully to avoid dents. The panels were longer than Lucas had worked with before, which meant they'd need to be even more precise with the framing measurements. One mistake, and the whole roof would be off. They started at dawn the following day. Metal roofing was unforgiving. Every panel had to line up perfectly. Every screw had to be placed exactly right. Too tight, and you'd warp the metal. Too loose, and it would leak. Lucas worked the ridge while Elena handled the lower sections, both of them moving in rhythm they'd developed over the past 3 weeks. Lily sat in the shade of a pine tree, reading a book she'd already finished twice. She looked up occasionally, checking to make sure her father was still there, still upright. Lucas caught her watching once and gave her a thumbs up. She didn't return it. By mid-afternoon, they'd covered half the roof. Lucas's shoulders were on fire, his hands cramping from gripping the drill. Elena had cut her palm on a sharp edge and wrapped it in duct tape, refusing to stop. They didn't talk. There was nothing left to say. They just worked. That's when the second truck arrived. Lucas was tightening a screw when he heard the engine. He looked down and saw a black pickup pulling into the clearing. A man in his 60s climbed out, wearing a suit that had no business being on a construction site. Elena saw him too. Her expression shifted, recognition, followed by something that looked like dread. "Who's that?" Lucas asked. "Marcus Hale," Elena said quietly. Lucas froze. "Hale? No relation, I'm guessing. Not one I know about." The man walked toward the barn with the casual confidence of someone who owned everything he looked at. He stopped at the base of the wall and tilted his head back, studying the roof. "Hell of a project," he called up. "Mind if I take a look?" "Yes," Elena said. Marcus smiled. "I'm not here to cause trouble, Miss Carter. Just want to talk." "We're busy. I can see that." He clasped his hands behind his back, still looking up at the structure. "You're doing good work, real good work. Shame it's going to waste." Lucas climbed down the ladder. Elena followed. "Say what you came to say and leave," Elena told Marcus. Marcus turned to face her. "I'm here with an offer." "I'm not selling." "You haven't heard the offer." "I don't need to." Marcus pulled a folded piece of paper from his jacket pocket and held it out. 200,000. Cash. You sign today. The money's in your account by Monday. Elena didn't take the paper. "The land's not for sale." "The land's going to be seized by the bank in 4 days." "Maybe. Maybe not." Marcus glanced at Lucas, then back at Elena. "You really think you're going to pass inspection with Ray Donner breathing down your neck?" "How do you know about Donner?" Lucas asked. Marcus smiled. "I know about everything that happens in this county, including who's paying him to sabotage us." The smile didn't falter. "I don't know what you're talking about." Lucas took a step forward. Elena put a hand on his arm, stopping him. "We're not interested," she said. "Leave." Marcus folded the paper and put it back in his pocket. "You're making a mistake. It's mine to make." "Maybe so. But when this falls apart, and it will, don't say I didn't try to help." He walked back to his truck, climbed in, and drove away without another word. Lucas watched the dust settle on the access road. "Friend of yours?" "He's been trying to buy this land for 2 years, Elena said. "Wants to build vacation cabins, turn the whole mountain into a resort. And you won't sell." "My father didn't want that, neither do I." Well, Lucas turned to look at her. "You could have taken the money, walked away clean." "Clean?" Elena laughed, but there was no humor in it. "There's nothing clean about giving up something that matters." They went back to work. The roof took another full day to complete. By the time they finished, Lucas's hands were too stiff to grip the drill without pain. Elena had stopped talking hours ago, moving on autopilot. But the roof was done. Metal panels gleamed in the late afternoon sun, each one aligned perfectly, each seam sealed tight. Lucas stood back and looked at it. For the first time since they'd started, the barn looked like something other than a disaster. It looked like something that might actually stand. "We did it," Elena said quietly. "We did the roof," Lucas corrected. "We still need to finish the siding, the windows, the doors, the interior framing." "Lucas," he looked at her. "Let me have this," she said, "just for a minute." So he did. They stood there together, exhausted and filthy and barely standing, looking at what they'd built. Lily walked over from the truck. She didn't say anything, just slipped her hand into Lucas's. He squeezed it gently. "It looks good, Dad," Lily said. "Yeah," Lucas said. "It does." That night, Lucas dreamed about falling. It was a dream he'd had before, though not in years. He was on a roof, not the barn, but another building, taller, steeper. He was reaching for something, a tool maybe, or a piece of wood, and then the surface beneath him gave way. He fell backward, arms flailing, the ground rushing up to meet him. He woke up gasping, sheets tangled around his legs. The clock on the nightstand read 3 a.m. He sat up, heart pounding, and pressed his palms against his eyes. It had been 8 years since the accident. 8 years since he'd walked away from the job that had almost killed him. He didn't think about it much anymore, didn't let himself. But it was always there, lurking in the background, waiting for moments like this. He'd been working on a commercial project, a 3-story office building downtown. Good money, tight deadline. The kind of job that made your reputation if you pulled it off. He'd been pushing hard, cutting corners he shouldn't have cut, ignoring safety protocols because they took too long. And then one afternoon, a scaffold had collapsed. He'd fallen 20 feet. He survived. Barely. Broken ribs, fractured wrist, concussion, 2 months of recovery. But the worst part wasn't the physical damage. It was the knowledge that he'd been responsible. Not for the scaffold, that had been a manufacturer defect, but for the environment that made the fall inevitable. He'd pushed too hard, demanded too much, created a culture where safety came second to speed. After that, he'd sworn off big projects. No more crews, no more deadlines, no more risks. He worked alone, kept things small, stayed in control, and now here he was, breaking every rule he'd made for himself. He got out of bed and went to check on Lily. She was asleep, curled on her side, one arm hanging off the edge of the mattress. He pulled the blanket up over her shoulder and stood there for a moment, watching her breathe. She deserved better than this. Better than a father who was always halfway gone, always chasing the next job, always one mistake away from disaster. But this job was almost over. 4 more days and it would be done. Elena would keep her land, Lucas would go back to his quiet life, and everything would return to normal. He just had to make it 4 more days. The next morning, the windows arrived. Lucas and Elena spent the day installing them, working methodically through each opening. The frames had to be level, the seals airtight, the flashing installed correctly to prevent leaks. It was slow work, but satisfying. Each completed window made the barn feel more like a real building and less like a pile of lumber held together by hope. They were working on the last window when Lucas's phone rang. He almost didn't answer. He was in the middle of applying caulk. But something made him check the screen. It was the bank. He wiped his hands on a rag and answered. Mr. Hale? This is Jennifer Morris from First National. I'm calling regarding the Carter property. Lucas stepped away from the barn. What about it? We've been trying to reach Ms. Carter, but she hasn't returned our calls. I need to confirm the inspection date. It's in 3 days. Yes, I'm aware. What I need to confirm is whether the inspection will be completed in time for the foreclosure hearing. Lucas frowned. Foreclosure hearing? Yes. It's scheduled for the same day. If the inspection isn't passed by 5 p.m., the property will be seized immediately. That wasn't part of the original agreement. The original agreement was 30 days to bring the property up to code. That deadline hasn't changed. But moving up the hearing? I'm just informing you of the timeline, Mr. Hale. Have a good day. She hung up. Lucas stood there, phone in hand, trying to process what he'd just heard. The bank had moved the hearing to the same day as the inspection, which meant even if they passed, they'd have 0 margin for error. No time to fix anything Donner flagged. No appeals process. Just pass or lose everything. He walked back to where Elena was working. We have a problem, he said. She looked up from the window frame. What now? He told her about the call. Elena's face went very still. They can't do that. Apparently they can. It's not legal. It's legal enough. Elena set down her caulk gun and stared at the barn. So we have to be perfect. Yeah. No mistakes. None. She was quiet for a long time. Then she picked up the caulk gun and went back to work. Then we don't make any, she said. The final 3 days became a blur of motion and pain and desperation. Lucas and Elena worked around the clock, sleeping in shifts, surviving on coffee and adrenaline. The siding went up piece by piece. The doors were hung. The interior framing was completed. Every detail had to be flawless because there wouldn't be a second chance. Lily stopped coming to the site. Mrs. Vega agreed to keep her full-time, and Lucas was too exhausted to argue. He missed her, missed the quiet weight of her presence, but he couldn't afford the distraction. Not now. On the final night before inspection, Lucas and Elena were inside the barn, going over every inch of the building with flashlights. They checked joints, tested outlets, examined seams, looking for anything Donner could use against them. Here, Elena said, pointing to a corner where 2 pieces of trim didn't quite meet. There was a gap, maybe 1/8 of an inch. Lucas filled it with caulk and sanded it smooth. They found a loose screw on one of the roof panels. Lucas tightened it, a window that stuck slightly. Elena planed down the frame until it opened smoothly. By 2 in the morning, they'd gone through the entire structure twice. Everything was as perfect as they could make it. Elena sat down on the floor, back against the wall. Lucas joined her. "What do you think?" she asked. "I think we did everything we could." "That's not an answer." Lucas was quiet for a moment. "I think it should pass. If Donner's honest, it passes." "And if he's not?" "Then we lose." Elena nodded slowly. She looked around the barn, at the walls they'd built, the floor they'd leveled, the roof they'd fought for. "It's a good building," she said quietly. "It is. My dad would have liked it." Lucas didn't know what to say to that, so he just sat there beside her in the silence. Outside, the mountain was quiet. No wind, no rain, just the soft sounds of night settling over the clearing. In a few hours, the sun would rise. Donner would arrive. And they'd find out if any of this had been enough. Elena stood up. "I should go. Get a few hours of sleep before tomorrow." Lucas stood too. "Elena." She turned. "Whatever happens," he said, "you didn't quit. That matters." "Does it?" "Yeah, it does." She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "See you in the morning." Lucas watched her walk to her truck and drive away. Then he turned off the lights, locked the barn, and sat on the tailgate of his own truck, staring up at the stars. He thought about Lily, asleep at Mrs. Vega's house. He thought about the life he'd built after the accident, small, safe, controlled. He thought about Elena, fighting for something that probably should have been let go a long time ago. And he realized he'd been wrong about something. He'd thought this job was about saving a barn, about meeting a deadline, passing an inspection, beating the system. But it wasn't. It was about refusing to let go of the things that mattered, even when letting go would be easier. It was about showing up when you had every reason not to. It was about building something that might not stand forever, but stood right now, in this moment, against everything trying to tear it down. Lucas climbed into his truck and drove home. Tomorrow, they'd find out if it was enough. Lucas didn't sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, running through every detail of the barn in his head. Every joint, every seal, every measurement. Looking for the mistake he might have missed. The one thing Donner would find and use to tear it all down. At 4:30, he gave up and got out of bed. He made coffee, checked on Lily, still asleep, and sat at the kitchen table with his phone, scrolling through the county building codes one more time. Not because he didn't know them, because he needed something to do with his hands. The inspection was scheduled for 9 a.m., the foreclosure hearing at 5 p.m. 8 hours between survival and losing everything. He thought about calling Elena, then decided against it. She needed whatever sleep she could get. They both did. Though he doubted she was sleeping any better than he was. At 6, he heard Lily's door open. She shuffled into the kitchen in her pajamas, hair sticking up on one side. "You're up early," she said. "Couldn't sleep." "Because of today?" Lucas nodded. Lily climbed into the chair across from him and pulled her knees to her chest. "Are you scared?" The question caught him off guard. Not because she'd asked, but because she'd asked it so plainly. Like she already knew the answer and was just checking to make sure. "Yeah," he said. "A little." "What happens if the barn doesn't pass?" "Elena loses the land." "What happens to you?" Lucas looked at his daughter. "Nothing happens to me." "That's not true." "Lily, you care about it," she said. "The barn. I can tell." He wanted to deny it. Wanted to say it was just a job, that he'd done his part, and whatever happened next wasn't his responsibility. But Lily was watching him with those two knowing eyes, and he couldn't lie to her. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I care about it." "Then I hope it passes." "Me too, kid." They sat together in the kitchen, not talking, just being. And for a moment, Lucas let himself feel grateful for that. For this small person who saw through all his carefully constructed walls and loved him anyway. At 7:30, he dropped Lily at Mrs. Vega's and headed for the mountain. Elena was already there when he arrived. She stood in front of the barn with her arms crossed, staring at it like she could will it to perfection through sheer force of concentration. She'd changed clothes since last night, clean jeans, a button-down shirt instead of her usual flannel. Like she was trying to present herself as someone who had their life together. Lucas parked and walked over to her. "You sleep?" he asked. "No. You?" "No." She turned to look at him. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but her jaw was set. I keep thinking I'm going to find something we missed. We didn't miss anything. How do you know? Because I've been doing this for 20 years, and I know when something's right. Elena looked back at the barn. It's really good, isn't it? It's perfect. Perfect doesn't seem to matter much when the inspector's corrupt. Lucas didn't have an answer for that. She was right. They'd built something that exceeded code in every measurable way. But if Donner was determined to fail them, measurements wouldn't matter. They spent the next hour doing a final walkthrough, checking outlets, testing doors, running water through the new plumbing. Everything worked. Everything was clean, level, properly installed. Lucas had built a lot of structures in his career, but this might have been the best work he'd ever done. At 8:45, Donner's truck appeared at the bottom of the access road. Lucas watched it climb toward the clearing, moving slowly, deliberately. The message was clear. Donner wasn't in a hurry. He had all day. They were the ones on the clock. The truck pulled in and parked. Donner climbed out with his clipboard and a camera. He was wearing the same smug expression he'd had the last time, like he'd already decided the outcome and was just here to make it official. "Morning," he said, walking toward them. "Inspector?" Elena replied, her voice flat. Donner looked at the barn, then back at them. "You actually finished it." "We did." "Huh." He made a note on his clipboard. "Well, let's see if it's up to code." He started at the foundation, kneeling to examine the footings they'd poured. Lucas and Elena stood back, letting him work. There was nothing to do now but wait. Donner moved methodically, checking every corner, every seam, every joint. He took pictures, made notes, asked questions that Lucas answered with the bare minimum of words. The whole thing felt like a performance. Donner going through the motions so he could claim he'd been thorough before failing them. After 30 minutes, they moved inside. Donner tested the outlets, flipped light switches, ran water in the utility sink. He examined the framing, the insulation, the drywall seams. Lucas watched his face, looking for any tell, any hint of what he was thinking, but Donner kept his expression neutral. "Electrical panel," Donner said. Lucas led him to the panel on the far wall. Donner opened it and studied the breakers, the wire gauges, the grounding. He took several pictures, made several notes. "This is a 200-amp panel," he said. "Yes." "Seems excessive for a barn." "It's to code." "I didn't say it wasn't." They moved to the roof access. Donner climbed the ladder and walked the surface, testing the metal panels, checking the ridge caps, examining the flashing around the vent pipes. Lucas and Elena waited below, both of them tense. After what felt like an hour, Donner climbed back down. "Plumbing," he said. They showed him the pipes, the drainage, the water heater they'd installed. Everything was properly vented, properly sloped, properly secured. Donner tested the hot water, checked for leaks, examined the pressure relief valve. He made another note. By 11, they'd been through every inch of the building. Lucas's stomach was in knots. Elena looked like she might throw up. Donner was still writing on his clipboard, taking his time, drawing it out. Finally, he looked up. "There are some issues," he said. Lucas felt something cold settle in his chest. "What issues?" "The door threshold on the south entrance is a 1/4 inch too high. Creates a trip hazard. That's within tolerance, not according to current code." "Show me the code." Donner flipped through the papers on his clipboard and pointed to a paragraph. Lucas read it twice. The threshold requirement was for public buildings, not agricultural structures. Donner was applying the wrong standard. "This doesn't apply," Lucas said. "I'm the inspector. I decide what applies." "You're using the wrong code section." "Mr. Hale, are you telling me how to do my job?" Lucas took a step forward. Elena grabbed his arm. "What else?" she asked Donner, her voice strained. Donner consulted his notes. "The roof ventilation is inadequate." "We have 4 ridge vents and 2 gable vents," Lucas said. "That's double the requirement." "Not for a structure this size." "Yes, for a structure this size. The square footage is—" "I know what the square footage is." Lucas clenched his fists. He could feel it slipping away, could feel Donner building his case piece by piece, using technicalities and misapplied codes to justify a failure. "Anything else?" Elena asked quietly. Donner looked at her. "The interior framing is non-standard." It exceeds load requirements by 30%, Lucas said. We overbuilt it deliberately. Non-standard means it doesn't meet code. Non-standard means it's better than code. Donner smiled. That's not how building regulations work. Lucas was about to respond when his phone buzzed. He pulled it out and glanced at the screen. A text from an unknown number. Check your email. Now. He frowned and opened his email. The most recent message was from someone named Richard Chen, subject line, Donner investigation. Lucas opened it. Inside was a PDF. 3 pages of documentation showing financial transactions between a shell company and Ray Donner's personal account. The shell company was owned by Marcus Hale. Lucas looked up at Donner. You want to talk about codes? Or you want to talk about the $20,000 Marcus Hale paid you last month? Donner's smile vanished. What are you talking about? Lucas turned his phone around, showing him the email. These financial records. Want to explain them? I don't know what that is. It's a paper trail. Shows you've been taking money to sabotage permits in this county. Donner's face went red. You're making accusations you can't prove. I'm not making them. The county attorney will. Lucas forwarded the email to his own attorney, then looked back at Donner. How long you think it'll take for this to get to the state licensing board? A day? 2? Donner stared at him, speechless. Elena stepped forward. So, here's what's going to happen. You're going to approve this barn. You're going to sign off on it right now, and you're going to walk away. Or we send this to every news outlet in the state and let them run with it. You can't threaten a county official, Donner said, but his voice had lost its confidence. We're not threatening, Lucas said. We're explaining consequences. For a long moment, nobody moved. The only sound was the wind moving through the pine trees outside. Then Donner grabbed his clipboard and signed the inspection form. He shoved it at Elena. You're approved. Thank you, Elena said, her voice barely above a whisper. Donner walked to his truck without another word. He climbed in, slammed the door, and drove away fast enough to kick up gravel. Lucas and Elena stood in the clearing, watching the dust settle. What just happened? Elena asked. We won. How did you get those records? Lucas looked at his phone. The email from Richard Chen had a signature line, investigative journalist, Harlan County Tribune. Below that was a phone number. Lucas called it. A man answered on the second ring. This is Chen. Lucas Hale, you sent me an email. I did. Been investigating Marcus Hale and his business practices for 6 months. When I heard about your barn project, I started digging into Donner, found the connection. Why help us? Because Marcus Hale has been buying up land in this county for years, pushing people out through intimidation and bribery. Someone needs to push back. Figured you were doing that. We're just trying to save a barn. You're doing more than that, trust me. Chen paused. The records I sent you are real. If Donner tries to retaliate, let me know. I've got more. Thank you, Lucas said. Thank Elena. She's the one who wouldn't quit. Chen hung up. Lucas turned to Elena. She was still staring at the inspection form in her hands, like she couldn't quite believe it was real. We passed, she said. We passed. She looked up at him, and for the first time in 3 weeks, she smiled. Not a small smile. A full one, the kind that reached her eyes and made her look 10 years younger. We actually did it, she said. Lucas felt something loosen in his chest. Relief, maybe, or exhaustion, or both. Yeah, he said, we did. They stood there for a moment, just breathing. Then Elena started laughing. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was the kind of laugh that comes when you've been holding tension for so long that release feels like breaking. Lucas found himself laughing too. They stood in front of the barn they'd built, laughing like idiots, and for those few seconds, nothing else mattered. Then Elena's phone rang. She pulled it out, looked at the screen, and her smile disappeared. It's the bank. Lucas's stomach dropped. Don't answer it. I have to. She answered the call. This is Elena. Lucas watched her face as she listened. Her expression went from cautious to confused to something that looked like disbelief. Are you sure? She asked. Then, yes. Yes, I understand. Thank you. She hung up. What? Lucas asked. The foreclosure hearing is canceled. What? They said the loan's been paid in full, as of this morning. Elena stared at her phone like it might have answers. I don't understand. I didn't pay anything. Lucas had a sinking feeling he knew exactly what had happened. Marcus. What? Marcus Hale. He paid off your loan. Elena's face went pale. Why would he do that? Because now he owns the debt. Instead of the bank foreclosing, he forecloses. And he doesn't have to wait 30 days or deal with inspections. He can call it due whenever he wants. That's legal? If you signed the right paperwork, yeah. Elena shook her head. I didn't sign anything. You sure? She started scrolling through her phone, looking for something. After a moment, she stopped. The loan modification, 3 months ago. The bank said they were restructuring the terms to give me more time. Did you read it? She closed her eyes. I skimmed it. I was so desperate for more time, I just signed. Lucas felt anger rising in his chest. He set you up. The whole time. The inspection, the delays, all of it. He was just waiting for you to default so he could take the land. But we passed inspection. Doesn't matter. If he owns the loan, he can accelerate it, demand full payment immediately, and if you can't pay, he forecloses. Elena's voice was hollow. They stood in silence, the weight of it settling over them. They'd fought so hard, worked themselves to exhaustion, built something perfect, and it still wasn't enough. Marcus had beaten them before they'd even started. Elena walked to the barn and pressed her palm against the wall. All this work, she said quietly. For nothing. It's not for nothing. Feels like it. Lucas wanted to argue, wanted to find some way to fix this, but he didn't know how. He was a builder, not a lawyer. He could make things stand, but he couldn't fight contracts and legal loopholes. His phone rang. He almost didn't answer it, but then he saw the number. His attorney. Yeah, Lucas said. Just got your email with those financial records, his attorney said. This is good stuff. Real good. Great. Unfortunately, it doesn't matter anymore. Why not? Lucas explained about the loan, about Marcus buying the debt, about the foreclosure. His attorney was quiet for a moment. Then, that might actually help. How? If Marcus paid off Elena's loan this morning, and we can prove he's been bribing a county official to sabotage her project, that's fraud. He used illegal means to force a default so he could acquire the property. That's textbook fraud. Lucas felt a spark of hope. Can we prove it? With Chen's documentation? Yeah, but we need to move fast. If Marcus files foreclosure papers, it gets messier. What do we do? Get me everything. The loan documents, the inspection records, the emails with Chen in. I'll file an injunction blocking any foreclosure action until we can investigate the fraud. How long will that take? To get the injunction? I can have it filed by end of business today. But you need to get me those documents now. Lucas looked at Elena. Can you send me copies of your loan paperwork? She nodded, already pulling out her phone. We're on it, Lucas told his attorney. He hung up and turned to Elena. We might have a shot. Might? If we can prove Marcus used illegal tactics to force your default, we can block the foreclosure, but we need to move fast. Elena was already scrolling through her email, forwarding documents. I'm sending everything. Lucas called Chen back and explained the situation. Chen agreed to provide sworn testimony about his investigation, along with copies of all the financial records he'd compiled. By 2 p.m., Lucas's attorney had everything. By 4, he'd filed the injunction. By 4:30, Marcus Hale's attorney was calling Elena, threatening legal action. Don't answer, Lucas said. He's going to keep calling. Let him. Elena's phone buzzed with a text. She looked at it and went very still. What? Lucas asked. She turned the phone so he could see. The message was from Marcus. This isn't over. You just made it worse for yourself. Lucas took the phone and blocked the number. He's bluffing. You don't know that. Yes, I do. He's scared. If he wasn't, he wouldn't be threatening you. He'd be filing papers. Elena sat down on the barn floor, her back against the wall. She looked completely drained. I'm so tired, Lucas. I know. I don't know how much more of this I can take. Lucas sat down beside her. You don't have to take it alone. She looked at him. Why are you still here? What? You could have walked away weeks ago, could have taken your money and left. But you're still here. Why? Lucas didn't answer right away. He looked around the barn, at the walls they'd built, the floor they'd leveled, the roof that had almost broken them. He thought about the past 3 weeks, the exhaustion and frustration and moments where he'd wanted to quit. And he thought about Elena, standing in the wreckage of her father's barn, refusing to give up. Because some things are worth fighting for, he said finally. Elena's eyes filled with tears. She wiped them away quickly, like she was embarrassed. I don't know how to thank you. You don't have to. Yes, I do. You gave up 3 weeks of your life for this. For me, I gave up 3 weeks of playing it safe, Lucas said. I needed that more than I realized. They sat together in the silence, neither of them moving. Outside, the sun was starting to set, casting long shadows across the clearing. The barn glowed in the golden light, solid and real and standing. Whatever happened next, whatever Marcus tried, whatever the courts decided, they'd built something that couldn't be undone, something that mattered, and that had to count for something. Elena's phone buzzed again. This time it was Lucas's attorney. She answered and put it on speaker. This is Elena. Ms. Carter, I have good news. The injunction was approved. Marcus Hale is legally barred from initiating any foreclosure proceedings until the fraud investigation is complete. Elena closed her eyes. How long will that take? Could be months, but here's the important part. If we can prove fraud, the loan transfer is void, which means ownership reverts to the original lender, and you go back to your original payment schedule. And if you can't prove it, then we fight it in court. But with Chen's documentation and the inspection records, I'm confident we have a strong case. Elena looked at Lucas. He nodded. Okay, she said. Do it. I'll keep you updated. For now, get some rest. You earned it. The attorney hung up. Elena and Lucas sat there for a long time, not talking, just being. The weight of the past 3 weeks finally lifting enough to breathe. It's not over, Elena said quietly. No, Lucas agreed. But it's not lost either. She turned to look at him. Will you stay? Through the investigation, the court case, whatever comes next? Lucas thought about his life before this job. The careful boundaries, the controlled existence, the safety he'd built around himself and Lily. He thought about how small that life had become. And he thought about what it felt like to build something that mattered with someone who wouldn't quit. Yeah, he said. I'll stay. Elena smiled. Not the exhausted smile from before. Something else. Something that looked like hope. Thank you, she said. Lucas stood and offered her his hand. She took it, and he pulled her to her feet. They walked out of the barn together, into the fading light. The mountain was quiet around them, the air cool and clean. Somewhere in the distance, a bird called. Another answered. Lucas looked back at the barn one more time. It stood solid against the darkening sky, a testament to what stubbornness and skill could build. They'd survived the first fight. Now they just had to survive the next one. The first week after the injunction, nothing happened. Lucas kept expecting Marcus to retaliate, to file an appeal, to show up at the property, to do something. But there was only silence. Elena checked her phone obsessively, waiting for news from the attorney, from the bank, from anyone. But the calls didn't come. Lucas went back to work on smaller jobs, things he could finish in a day or two. Deck repairs, fence installations, simple projects that paid the bills. But his mind kept drifting back to the barn, to Elena, to the fight that wasn't over yet. Lily noticed. She always noticed. You're thinking about the barn again, she said one evening at dinner. Lucas looked up from his plate. What? You get this look like you're somewhere else. Sorry, kid. It's okay. She pushed her green beans around with her fork. Are you going to go back there? To the barn? Yeah. Lucas considered the question. The barn was finished, past inspection. There was no construction work left to do. But Elena had asked him to stay, and he'd said yes. He just hadn't figured out what that meant yet. I don't know, he said honestly. Lily nodded, like she'd expected that answer. I think you should. Yeah? She needs you. Lucas set down his fork. What makes you say that? Lily shrugged. I saw how she looked at you. When we were at the barn, she looked at you like you were important. Lily, it's okay, Dad. I'm not mad or anything. She finally speared a green bean and ate it. I think it's good. You've been alone a long time. Lucas didn't know how to respond to that. His 8-year-old daughter was giving him relationship advice, and worse, she was probably right. I'm not alone, he said. I have you. That's different. How? Because I'm your kid. You have to keep me. She smiled a little. Elena chose you. Lucas felt something tighten in his chest. It's not like that. Okay. I'm serious. Well, I said okay. They finished dinner in silence. Afterwards, while Lily did her homework, Lucas sat on the porch with his phone, staring at Elena's number. He'd texted her a few times over the past week, checking in, seeing if she'd heard from the attorney. Short, practical messages. Nothing that acknowledged the conversation they'd had in the barn, the moment when she'd asked him to stay, and he'd agreed without thinking. He typed out a message. How are you holding up? Then deleted it. Tried again. Any news from the lawyer? Deleted that too. Finally settled on, you okay? He hit send before he could overthink it. 3 dots appeared immediately, then disappeared, then appeared again. Her response came through. Can you come by tomorrow? Lucas wrote back. What time? Whenever works for you. He looked at his schedule. He had a morning job in town, but nothing after that. 2 p.m.? See you then. Lucas put his phone away and sat there, watching the sun set through the trees. Lily was right. He'd been alone a long time. Not physically. He had his daughter, had his work, had enough acquaintances to fill the spaces when needed, but actually alone. Keeping everyone at a distance because it was safer that way. Elena had gotten past that. Somehow, in 3 weeks of exhaustion and desperation and fighting impossible odds, she'd gotten through all his carefully maintained walls. And he didn't know what to do with that. The next day, Lucas finished his morning job early and headed up the mountain. The access road looked different in daylight without the pressure of a deadline hanging over it. The trees were fuller, greener. The clearing opened up ahead of him, and there was the barn, standing solid and complete in the afternoon sun. Elena's truck was parked near the entrance. Lucas pulled up beside it and climbed out. She emerged from inside the barn, wiping her hands on her jeans. She looked better than she had a week ago. Less exhausted, more present. Her hair was pulled back and she wore a faded work shirt with the sleeves rolled up. Hey, she said. Hey, thanks for coming. What's going on? Elena gestured toward the barn. Come inside. I want to show you something. Lucas followed her through the door. The interior had been cleaned since the inspection. No more tools scattered around, no more sawdust coating every surface. The space felt bigger somehow, more open. Late afternoon light poured through the windows they'd installed, illuminating the grain in the wooden beams. Elena had set up a workspace in one corner. A long workbench, some of her father's old tools arranged on the wall. A few pieces of lumber stacked neatly beside it. On the bench sat what looked like the beginning of a chair. The legs assembled, the seat frame roughed out. You're building furniture, Lucas said. Trying to. Elena picked up a piece of sandpaper and ran it along one of the chair legs. I figured if I'm going to keep this place, I should actually use it for something. This is what my dad did. Made furniture, sold it locally. I thought maybe I could learn. Lucas walked over to the bench and examined the chair frame. The joinery was clean, the proportions right. Not expert work, but solid, competent. You're doing good, he said. I watched you for 3 weeks, picked up a few things. More than a few? Elena set down the sandpaper. I've been thinking about what happens next, after the court case, after everything's settled, assuming I get to keep the land. You will. Maybe. But if I do, I can't just let this barn sit empty. I need to make it work. Actually build something sustainable here. She looked around the space. I'm thinking about turning it into a workshop, taking commissions, maybe teaching classes eventually. People come up here for the views, the hiking. Could be a market for handmade stuff. Lucas could see it, could picture the barn full of projects, Elena working the way her father had, building something that lasted. That's a good plan, he said. Would you help? The question caught him off guard. With what? Getting it set up. The business side I can figure out, but the workshop itself, I need better lighting, more power outlets, proper ventilation. And I don't know what I don't know, you know? Lucas looked at her. She was trying to keep her expression neutral, but he could see the vulnerability underneath. She was asking for more than help with electrical outlets. She was asking him to be part of whatever came next. Yeah, he said. I can help with that. Elena smiled. Thank you. When do you want to start? Whenever you have time. Lucas thought about his schedule, the small jobs waiting, the carefully controlled life he'd built. And he thought about Lily's words from the night before. She chose you. I'll make time, he said. They spent the next 2 hours walking through the barn, discussing modifications, where to add outlets, what kind of lighting would work best, whether to build storage into the walls or keep it freestanding. Elena had ideas, clear, specific ones, and Lucas found himself getting pulled into the planning, sketching rough diagrams on a notepad, calculating loads and circuits. It felt good. Not the desperate, exhausting work of the past month, but the kind of work that built towards something, that had room to breathe. Around 4, Elena's phone rang. She looked at the screen and her expression shifted. It's the attorney. Lucas nodded. Elena answered and put it on speaker. Ms. Carter, this is David Brennan. I have an update on the case. Okay. The county attorney's office has opened a formal investigation into Ray Donner based on the evidence Richard Chen provided. Donner's been suspended pending the outcome. That's good, right? It's very good. It strengthens our fraud case significantly. If Donner was taking bribes from Marcus Hale to sabotage your project, that establishes a clear pattern of illegal activity. Elena glanced at Lucas. What does that mean for the foreclosure? Marcus's attorney filed a motion to dismiss the injunction this morning. They're arguing the loan transfer was legitimate and unrelated to Donner's activities. We'll have a hearing next week to argue against it. Can they win? Brennan hesitated. It's possible, but unlikely. The timeline is too convenient. Marcus bought your debt the same week Donner was actively trying to fail your inspection. A judge is going to see that connection. So what do we do? Show up to the hearing. Be prepared to testify about Donner's conduct, the inspection process, everything. We need to establish that Marcus used illegal means to force a default. I can do that. Good. I'll send you the hearing details. In the meantime, don't communicate with Marcus or anyone from his organization. If they contact you, let me know immediately. Elena agreed and hung up. Lucas watched her process the information. You okay? I don't know. A hearing feels like progress, but it also feels like more waiting. That's what legal stuff is. Waiting and paperwork. I hate it. Everyone does. Elena walked to the open barn door and looked out at the clearing. The sun was lower now, painting everything in warm orange light. What if we lose? We won't. But what if we do? What if Marcus finds some legal loophole and takes the land anyway? Lucas joined her at the door. Then you fight harder. Appeal, file complaints, whatever it takes. But you don't give up. I'm tired of fighting. I know. I just want to build things, to work in peace. Is that too much to ask? Lucas didn't have an answer for that. In his experience, peace was something you had to carve out by force. Nobody just gave it to you. They stood together in silence, watching the light change. After a while, Elena spoke again. Can I ask you something? Sure. Why did you really take this job? And don't say you don't know. There had to be a reason. Lucas thought about lying, about giving her some vague answer that wouldn't reveal too much. But he was tired of keeping walls up. 8 years ago, I had an accident on a job site, he said. Fell 20 feet off a scaffold, broke a bunch of bones, spent 2 months recovering. It wasn't my fault, equipment failure, but I'd created the environment that made it happen. I was pushing too hard, cutting corners, ignoring safety because I was more worried about deadlines than people. Elena was quiet, listening. After that, I quit taking big jobs. No more crews, no more pressure, no more risks. Just me, working alone, staying in control. He looked at the barn. And then you called. And I should have said no because everything about this job was exactly what I'd been avoiding. But there was something in your voice, this refusal to quit even when quitting made sense. And I guess I needed to remember what that felt like. Did you? Remember? Lucas nodded slowly. Yeah, I did. Elena reached over and took his hand. Her palm was rough with calluses from 3 weeks of construction work. "I'm glad you answered the phone." "Me too." They stood like that for a moment, hands linked, watching the sun drop toward the horizon. Then Elena's phone rang again. She pulled it out, saw the number, and frowned. "I don't recognize this. Don't answer it." Could be the attorney calling from a different line. She answered. "Hello?" Lucas watched her face change, confusion, then anger. "How did you get this number?" she asked. Then, after listening, "I'm not interested in talking to you." She hung up. "Marcus?" Lucas asked. His assistant. "Wanted to arrange a meeting. Said Marcus has a proposal that could resolve everything without court." "That's a trap." "I know." "You told him no?" "I told him I'm not interested." Elena shoved the phone in her pocket. "I'm so sick of this. The threats, the manipulation, the constant pressure. I just want him to leave me alone." Lucas understood the feeling. Marcus was the kind of man who saw other people as obstacles or assets, nothing in between. And he wouldn't stop until he got what he wanted or someone made him stop. "The hearing's next week," Lucas said. "After that, we'll know where we stand. And if we lose, then we figure out the next step. But we don't give up." Elena nodded, but she looked worn down in a way that had nothing to do with physical exhaustion. This was deeper, the kind of tired that came from fighting battles you shouldn't have to fight. Lucas wanted to fix it, wanted to find some way to make it easier, but he couldn't. All he could do was stand beside her and refuse to leave. "Come on," he said. "Let's get out of here. Go grab dinner or something." Elena looked surprised. "Dinner?" "Yeah, when's the last time you ate a meal that wasn't out of a thermos?" "I don't remember." "Then it's been too long." They locked up the barn and drove down the mountain in separate trucks. Lucas called Mrs. Vega on the way, asking if she could keep Lily for another few hours. Mrs. Vega agreed, her voice warm with understanding. They met at a diner on the edge of town. Nothing fancy, just a place with good burgers and better coffee. Elena slid into the booth across from Lucas and picked up a menu, even though they both already knew what they wanted. The waitress came over, poured coffee without asking, and took their orders. When she left, Elena wrapped her hands around the mug and just sat there, letting the warmth seep into her palms. "This is nice," she said quietly. "What is?" "Sitting, not working, just being." Lucas understood. They'd spent 3 weeks in constant motion, fighting the clock, every minute accounted for. This was the first time they'd stopped without collapsing. "You know what I keep thinking about?" Elena said. "What?" "That day you showed up, when you stood there telling me all the reasons the barn couldn't be saved. I was so mad at you." "I remember." "I thought you were just another person trying to get me to quit, to accept that I'd lost." "I was trying to be realistic." "I know, but I didn't need realistic. I needed someone who'd fight with me." She looked up from her coffee. "And you did. Even after you said it was impossible, you stayed and helped make it possible. We got lucky." "No, we worked our asses off and refused to quit. That's not luck." The food arrived. They ate without talking much, both of them too hungry to bother with conversation. But the silence was comfortable, easy. Halfway through her burger, Elena spoke again. "If I win the hearing, if I get to keep the land, would you stay involved? With the workshop, I mean. Not just setting it up, but actually working together sometimes?" Lucas swallowed. "In what way?" "I don't know exactly. Partner, maybe? Consultant? Whatever makes sense." She set down her burger. "I know you have your own business, your own life, but I like working with you, and I think we're good at it." "We are. So would you?" Lucas thought about it. Thought about what it would mean to tie himself to this place, to Elena, to a future that wasn't completely under his control. A month ago, the idea would have terrified him, but now, sitting across from her in a diner booth, it just felt right. "Yeah," he said, "I'd like that." Elena smiled, and it was the first real, unguarded smile he'd seen from her since the day they passed inspection. They finished eating and sat there with more coffee, talking about the workshop, about potential projects, about what Elena wanted to build. The conversation flowed easily, ideas building on each other, both of them getting excited about possibilities. It was close to 8 when they finally left. Lucas walked Elena to her truck. "Thank you for dinner," she said. Thanks for the company. She opened the truck door, then paused. Lucas? Yeah? I meant what I said, about you being important. She climbed into the truck before he could respond, started the engine, and drove away. Lucas stood in the parking lot, watching her taillights disappear down the road. Then he got in his own truck and headed home. Lily was asleep when he picked her up from Mrs. Vega's. He carried her to the truck, buckled her in, and drove through the quiet streets. At a red light, he glanced in the rearview mirror and saw her eyes open, watching him. "Did you have a good time?" she asked, her voice sleepy. "Yeah, kid. I did." "Good." The light turned green. Lucas drove home, carried Lily inside, and tucked her into bed. Then he sat at the kitchen table with his laptop, looking at his schedule for the next few weeks. He had jobs lined up, commitments made, but nothing that couldn't be rearranged. Nothing more important than being at that hearing, standing beside Elena when the judge made a decision that would determine everything. He cleared his calendar for the hearing day and the week after. Then he closed the laptop and went to bed. The week passed slowly. Lucas worked his regular jobs, came home to Lily, tried not to think too much about the hearing. But it was always there, a weight in the background. Elena texted him updates from the attorney. Marcus had filed additional motions, trying to delay the hearing, trying to get the injunction dismissed early. Brennan fought each one, and the hearing date held. The night before, Lucas couldn't sleep again. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, running through scenarios. Best case, worst case, everything in between. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from Elena. "You awake?" Lucas wrote back. "Yeah, can't sleep either." "Nervous?" "Terrified." Lucas called her instead of texting. She answered on the first ring. "Hey," she said. "Hey. I keep thinking about what I'll say. If I have to testify, I keep practicing it in my head and it sounds stupid every time. Just tell the truth. That's all you can do. What if the truth isn't enough?" "It will be." Elena was quiet for a moment. "Will you be there? At the hearing?" "Of course." "Thank you." They talked for another 20 minutes, about nothing important, just the sound of each other's voices in the dark. Eventually, Elena yawned. "I should try to sleep," she said. "Me too." Lucas? Yeah? "Whatever happens tomorrow, I'm glad we did this. Built the barn, fought back, all of it." "Me too, Elena." "See you in the morning." "See you." Lucas hung up and set the phone down. This time, when he closed his eyes, sleep came easier. The hearing was scheduled for 10 a.m. at the county courthouse. Lucas dropped Lily at school and headed downtown. He found Elena in the hallway outside the courtroom, pacing. She wore a simple dress and jacket, her hair down instead of pulled back. She looked professional, put together, but her hands were shaking. "You okay?" Lucas asked. "No." "Fair enough." Brennan appeared from inside the courtroom. "We're about to start. Elena, you'll be called to testify first. Just answer the questions honestly. Don't volunteer extra information. If you don't know something, say you don't know." Elena nodded. They filed into the courtroom. It was smaller than Lucas expected. Just a judge's bench, a few tables, some chairs for observers. Marcus sat at the defendant's table with his attorney, looking calm and confident. He glanced at Elena as she entered and smiled slightly. Lucas wanted to punch him. The judge entered and everyone stood. Then the hearing began. Brennan presented the case methodically. The timeline of events, the financial records showing payments from Marcus to Donner, the inspection reports documenting Donner's improper conduct. He called Richard Chen to testify about his investigation, and Chen walked through the evidence with clear, professional precision. Then Elena took the stand. Brennan asked her about the barn, about the loan, about Donner's inspections. Elena answered carefully, her voice steady despite the fear Lucas could see in her eyes. Marcus's attorney cross-examined her, trying to establish that the loan transfer was unrelated to Donner's conduct. But Elena held her ground, pointing out the timing, the pressure, the way everything had accelerated at once. After an hour, the judge called a recess. Lucas found Elena in the hallway. She was leaning against the wall, eyes closed. "You did good," he said. "I stumbled on 2 questions." "You did fine." She opened her eyes. "What do you think?" "I think we have a shot." The hearing reconvened. Marcus's attorney called witnesses, a bank officer who claimed the loan transfer was standard procedure, a construction expert who suggested the barn might not have been as well built as claimed. But Brennan dismantled each argument, pointing to the inspection approval, to Chen's documentation, to the pattern of illegal activity. Finally, the judge held up a hand. "I've heard enough," she said. I'm ready to rule." The courtroom went silent. The judge looked at Marcus, then at Elena. "The evidence presented today establishes a clear pattern of fraudulent activity designed to force a default on Ms. Carter's loan. The timing of the loan transfer, combined with the documented payments to Inspector Donner, leaves no reasonable doubt that Mr. Hale engaged in illegal conduct to acquire this property." Marcus's attorney started to object, but the judge cut him off. "The injunction will remain in place. Furthermore, the loan transfer is hereby declared void. Ownership of the debt reverts to the original lender, and Ms. Carter's payment schedule is reinstated as it existed prior to the transfer." Elena made a small sound, half gasp, half sob. "Mr. Hale," the judge continued, "you are permanently barred from acquiring any interest in the Carter property. If you attempt further contact with Ms. Carter or engage in any retaliatory action, I will hold you in contempt. Are we clear?" Marcus's jaw tightened. "Yes, Your Honor." "Good. This hearing is adjourned." The gavel came down. Elena turned to Lucas, tears streaming down her face. He pulled her into a hug, and she held on like she might fall apart if she let go. "It's over," she whispered. "It's really over." "You won," Lucas said. "You kept it." Brennan joined them, smiling. "Congratulations, Ms. Carter. The land is yours." Elena pulled back from Lucas, wiping her eyes. "Thank you. For everything. You fought hard for this. You earned it." They left the courthouse together. Outside, the sun was shining, and the air felt cleaner somehow, lighter. Marcus's truck was gone from the parking lot. Elena stood on the courthouse steps, looking up at the sky. "I can't believe it's actually over." "Believe it." She turned to Lucas. "What now?" Lucas thought about the barn, about the workshop Elena wanted to build, about Lily's words and the future that was suddenly possible. "Now we build something that lasts," he said. Elena smiled. "Yeah, let's do that." The first thing Elena did after winning the hearing was drive straight to the barn. Lucas followed in his own truck, and when they pulled into the clearing, she just sat there for a moment, hands on the wheel, staring at the building like she was seeing it for the first time. Then she climbed out, walked to the entrance, and pressed both palms flat against the door. "It's mine," she said quietly. "Actually, mine." Lucas stood beside her. "Always was." "No. Marcus had his hooks in it. The bank had their claim. But now it's just mine." She turned to look at him. "Ours, I guess. If you meant what you said about working together." "I meant it." Elena pushed the door open and walked inside. The afternoon light poured through the windows, and the space felt different now. Not like a project they'd barely finished, but like something real, permanent. She walked to the workbench in the corner, picked up the half-finished chair she'd been building, and examined it. "I need to get better at this." "You will." "How long did it take you? To get good at building?" Lucas thought about it. "I'm still learning, 20 years in, and I'm still learning." "That's not very encouraging." "It's honest." Elena set the chair down and looked around the barn. "I've been thinking about what comes next. The workshop idea, the commissions. But I need to make money faster than that. The loan's still there, and I'm behind on payments." "How far behind?" 3 months. Lucas did the math in his head. "What's the monthly?" 1,800. "So you need 5,400 just to catch up. Plus the next month's payment. 6,000, basically." She leaned against the workbench. "I've got about 2,000 saved, which means I need 4 more by the end of next month. Can you pick up more shifts at your other jobs?" "I'm already working 60 hours a week between the diner and the hardware store. I can't do more without collapsing." Lucas understood the trap she was in. She'd won the legal battle, but the financial one was just beginning, and without cash flow, the barn didn't matter. She'd lose it to the bank eventually anyway. "What if we take on a project together?" he said. "Something big enough to generate real money. Split the profit." Elena looked at him. "What kind of project?" "I don't know yet, but there's always demand for good work. We just need to find it." "How?" Lucas pulled out his phone and started scrolling through his contacts. Let me make some calls. Over the next 3 days, Lucas reached out to every contractor, developer, and property owner he'd worked with over the past decade. Most said they didn't have anything. A few had small jobs, but nothing that would generate the kind of money Elena needed. Then on Thursday afternoon, he got a call back from a developer named Sarah Chen. No relation to Richard, she'd clarified the first time they'd spoken years ago. Lucas, I might have something, Sarah said, but it's not pretty. I'm listening. Client bought a property in Millbrook. Old farmhouse, been vacant for 5 years, wants to flip it, but the place is a disaster. Foundation issues, roofs half gone, electrical from the 1940s. Previous contractor took one look and walked away. How bad? Bad enough that I'm having trouble finding anyone willing to touch it. But if someone could pull it off, there's good money in it. Clients motivated, timelines flexible, and they're willing to pay premium for quality work. What's premium? $35,000 for the job. Maybe more if the scope expands. Lucas did the math. Split 2 ways, that was over $17,000 each. More than enough to catch Elena up and give her breathing room. When can I see it? He asked. Tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. I'll text you the address. Lucas hung up and called Elena. I might have something, he said when she answered. What kind of something? A flip job, farmhouse in bad shape. Pays well. How well? $17,000. Your share. Elena was quiet for a moment. That's enough to catch up the loan and cover 2 more months. Exactly. What's the catch? It's a hard job. Foundation work, full roof replacement, complete electrical overhaul. The kind of project that could go sideways fast. So, basically what we just did with the barn. Yeah, but this time we're getting paid. Elena laughed, and it was the first time Lucas had heard her laugh without the weight of desperation behind it. When do we start? I'm looking at it tomorrow. Come with me. We'll decide together if it's worth taking. They met at the property the next morning. Sarah was already there, standing in the overgrown driveway, looking at the house with an expression that suggested she regretted getting involved. The farmhouse was worse than Lucas had imagined. 2 stories, probably built in the 30s, with white paint peeling off in sheets. The front porch sagged in the middle. Half the roof was covered in blue tarps that had been there so long they'd started to disintegrate. Windows were broken, gutters hung at odd angles, and the whole structure leaned slightly to the left. Jesus, Elena said. Sarah walked over to them. I know, it's rough. Rough is generous, Lucas said. This thing's a teardown. Client doesn't want to tear it down, wants to restore it. Keep the character, fix the problems. That's going to cost more than a teardown and rebuild. They know. They've got the budget. Question is whether you've got the skill. Lucas walked around the perimeter examining the foundation. It had settled unevenly, causing the lean. The stone basement walls had cracks, and water damage was visible on the lower sections. But the bones were solid, thick timber framing, good materials, just neglected for too long. Elena joined him at the back of the house. Can it be saved? Maybe. Foundation needs to be stabilized, probably jacked and re-leveled. Roof's a complete replacement. Electrical will have to be ripped out and redone. Plumbing, too, most likely. So basically everything. Yeah. Can we do it? Lucas looked at the house, then at Elena. We did the barn in 30 days under constant sabotage. This place has no deadline, no corrupt inspector, and an actual budget. We can do it. Elena turned to Sarah. What's the timeline? 3 months. Sooner if possible, but 3 months is the outside limit. And the pay? $35,000 base. Additional for anything beyond the original scope. Materials covered separately, half up front, half on completion. Elena looked at Lucas. What do you think? I think it's a lot of work, but it's good work, and the money's real. Then let's do it. They shook hands with Sarah and spent the next hour documenting the property, taking photos, measuring rooms, cataloging every problem they could find. By the time they finished, Lucas had filled 6 pages in his notebook. Driving back toward town, Elena called him. You sure about this? She asked when he answered. Are you? I asked first. Lucas thought about it. The farmhouse was a massive undertaking, the kind of project that would consume the next 3 months of his life. But it was also exactly the kind of work he'd gotten into construction to do, taking something broken and making it whole. "Yeah," he said, "I'm sure." "Okay, then so am I." They started the following Monday. The first 2 weeks were demolition and assessment, stripping out the damaged materials, exposing the underlying structure, figuring out exactly how bad things were. Lucas brought in a structural engineer to evaluate the foundation. The engineer confirmed what Lucas had suspected. The house needed to be jacked up, the foundation repaired, and the whole thing releveled before they could do anything else. It was expensive, technical work, but Lucas had done it before, and Elena was a fast learner. They rented hydraulic jacks, built temporary support structures, and slowly, carefully lifted the house 6 inches off its foundation. Lily came by after school most days. She'd started bringing her homework to the farmhouse the way she'd brought it to the barn, sitting on the tailgate or the front steps, working quietly while the adults tore apart walls and hauled debris. She didn't complain. She just watched, sometimes helping carry tools or sweep up, making herself useful in small ways. One afternoon, Elena sat down beside her on the steps. "You doing okay?" Elena asked. Lily looked up from her math worksheet. "Yeah." "You spend a lot of time watching us work. That must be boring." "It's not boring." "No?" Lily shook her head. "I like seeing things get fixed. Like at first it looks impossible, but then you and my dad figure it out, and it gets better." Elena smiled. "That's a good way to look at it." "Do you like working with my dad?" The question was so direct that Elena had to pause. "Yeah, I do." "He likes working with you too, I can tell." "How can you tell?" "He smiles more. When you're around." Lily went back to her math. "He didn't smile much before." Elena didn't know what to say to that. She sat there for a moment, then stood and went back to work. By the end of the first month, the foundation was repaired and the house was level. They'd replaced all the structural beams that had rotted, reinforced the floor joists, and begun framing out the roof. The work was hard but steady. No sabotage, no corrupt inspectors, no impossible deadlines, just craftsmanship and time. Lucas found himself settling into a rhythm with Elena that felt natural. They didn't need to talk much while working. They developed a shorthand over the weeks at the barn, a way of anticipating what the other needed before they asked. It made the work faster, more efficient, but it was more than efficiency. There was something about working beside her that made Lucas feel less alone than he'd felt in years, like he was part of something that mattered, building toward a future that included more than just survival. One evening, after they'd finished for the day, Elena sat on the porch of the farmhouse and looked at the progress they'd made. "It's starting to look like a real house again," she said. Lucas joined her on the porch. "Getting there. I keep thinking about the barn. How impossible it seemed at first. And now this place, which seemed just as impossible. But here we are. Here we are." Elena was quiet for a moment. "I never thanked you properly for taking the barn job, for staying when you could have left, for all of it." "You don't have to thank me." "Yes, I do." She turned to look at him. "You changed my life, Lucas. I know that sounds dramatic, but it's true. If you hadn't shown up that day, I would have lost everything. The land, the barn, all of it. You would have found another way." "I don't think so. I was out of options, out of time. You were the last call I made." She looked down at her hands. "And you said yes when you should have said no. That means something." Lucas didn't know how to respond. He'd spent so long keeping people at a distance, convinced that getting involved only led to complications. But Elena had broken through that without even trying. She'd just been herself, stubborn and honest and unwilling to quit. And somehow, that had been enough. "I'm glad I said yes," he told her. "Me too." They sat together as the sun set, not talking, just being present. And for the first time in a long time, Lucas felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The second month brought its own challenges. The electrical system was worse than expected. They had to rewire the entire house, running new lines, installing modern panels, bringing everything up to current code. It was tedious, time-consuming work that required precision and patience. The plumbing was its own nightmare. Pipes had frozen and burst at some point, leaving water damage throughout the walls. They had to replace most of the system, rerouting lines, installing new fixtures, testing for leaks. But slowly, methodically, the house came together. They installed new windows, rebuilt the front porch, replaced the roof with architectural shingles that matched the original style. Inside, they repaired plaster walls, refinished the original hardwood floors, restored the fireplace that had been boarded up decades ago. Sarah stopped by regularly to check progress. Each time, she looked more impressed. "I didn't think you could pull this off," she admitted during one visit. "The last contractor took one look and said it was impossible." "Impossible just takes longer," Elena said. Sarah laughed. "I'll remember that." She approved additional funds for upgrades, better kitchen cabinets, premium bathroom fixtures, a refinished staircase. The budget grew and so did their eventual payment. By the middle of the third month, they were in the final push. Painting, trim work, final inspections. The kind of detail work that made the difference between good and great. Lucas was installing the last piece of crown molding in the master bedroom when his phone rang. He almost didn't answer, but when he saw it was Brennan, Elena's attorney, he picked up. "Lucas, is Elena with you?" Brennan asked. "She's downstairs. Why?" "I've got news. Can you put me on speaker?" Lucas called down to Elena. She came up the stairs, and he put the phone on speaker. "What's going on?" Elena asked. "The county attorney's office wrapped up their investigation into Ray Donner," Brennan said. "He's been formally charged with bribery, fraud, and abuse of office. They've also opened an investigation into Marcus Hale." "What does that mean?" Elena asked. "It means Marcus is facing serious legal trouble, criminal charges potentially, and there's more. 3 other property owners have come forward claiming Marcus used similar tactics against them. The county's looking at a pattern of predatory land acquisition." Lucas and Elena exchanged glances. "Is Elena in any danger?" Lucas asked. "Legally, I mean." "No, her case is closed, but I thought she'd want to know that standing up to Marcus helped expose a much larger problem." After they hung up, Elena sat down on the floor, back against the wall. "Other people," she said quietly. "He did this to other people." "Yeah. I thought I was alone. Thought it was just me he was targeting." Lucas sat down beside her. "You weren't alone. And because you fought back, those other people have a chance now too." Elena nodded slowly. "I guess the barn mattered more than I realized." It always mattered. They finished the farmhouse 2 weeks later. The final inspection passed without issues. Sarah walked through with her client, and Lucas watched their faces as they moved from room to room. The client, a woman in her 50s who'd grown up in the house, kept touching the walls, the staircase railing, the refinished floors. "It's exactly how I remembered it," she said, her voice thick. "Better, even." Sarah handed Lucas and Elena the final check, $17,500 each, plus a bonus for finishing early. Elena stared at the check like she couldn't quite believe it was real. "You earned it," Sarah said. "This is the best restoration work I've seen in years. If you two ever want more projects, call me. I'll keep you busy." After Sarah and her client left, Lucas and Elena stood in the empty living room of the farmhouse. Sunlight poured through the windows, illuminating the space they'd rebuilt from ruins. "We did it," Elena said. "We did. I can pay off the loan arrears, cover the next 3 months, maybe even hire some help for the workshop." "That's good." Elena turned to look at him. "What about you? What are you going to do with your share?" Lucas hadn't thought about it much. The money would give him breathing room, let him be more selective about jobs. Maybe take Lily on a real vacation instead of just weekend trips to the lake. "I don't know yet," he said. "Figure it out as I go." "Very Lucas of you." "What's that supposed to mean?" Elena smiled. "You never plan too far ahead. Always staying flexible, keeping your options open." "Safer that way." "Is it? Or is it just lonelier?" The question hung in the air between them. Lucas knew what she was really asking, what they'd been dancing around for months now. "Elena, I know, you've got Lily to think about, your life, your routine. I'm not asking you to change everything." She walked over to where he stood. "But I'm also not going to pretend I don't care about you, because I do. A lot. And I think you care about me too." Lucas looked at her. At this woman who'd fought impossible odds, who'd refused to quit even when quitting made sense, who'd somehow become essential to his life without him noticing until it was too late. "I do," he said quietly. "Care about you." So what do we do about it? I don't know. Still figuring it out as you go? Yeah. Elena reached up and kissed him. Not desperately, not urgently, just softly, like she had all the time in the world and wanted him to know it. When she pulled back, Lucas was too surprised to speak. There, Elena said. Now you've got something to figure out. She walked out of the farmhouse, leaving Lucas standing there alone in the empty room. He touched his lips, smiled despite himself, and followed her outside. The next few weeks settled into something new. Lucas continued taking jobs, but he rearranged his schedule to spend more time at Elena's barn. They worked together on workshop upgrades, better lighting, additional workbenches, a proper dust collection system. Elena took on her first commission, a dining table for a couple in town. Lucas helped with the design, showed her techniques for joinery, watched her confidence grow. Lily started spending more time at the barn too. Elena taught her how to use hand tools, how to measure and mark lumber, how to sand a surface smooth. Lily took to it naturally, working with the same quiet focus she brought to everything. One Saturday afternoon, Elena suggested they all drive into town for lunch. It wasn't a formal thing, just a casual suggestion. But when they sat down at the diner, Lucas, Elena, and then Lily together in a booth, it felt like something had shifted, like they'd crossed from working together into something that looked a lot like family. Lily seemed to feel it too. She sat between them, talking about school, about a project she was working on, about how she wanted to build a birdhouse for the backyard. Elena listened with real interest, asking questions, offering ideas, not trying to be a parent, just being present. After lunch, as they walked back to the trucks, Lily took Elena's hand. It was such a small gesture, but Lucas saw Elena's face when it happened. Surprise, then something soft and warm. That night, after Lily was asleep, Lucas sat on his porch and thought about the past 4 months. About the barn, the farmhouse, the impossibilities they'd turned into reality. About Elena and Lily and the life he was building without quite meaning to. His phone buzzed. A text from Elena. You awake? Yeah. Can I ask you something? Sure, are you happy? Lucas stared at the question. When was the last time someone had asked him that? When was the last time he'd asked himself? He thought about Lily, asleep in her room, about the work he did, the things he built, about Elena and the barn on the mountain. Yeah, he typed back. I think I am. Good, Elena wrote. You deserve to be. So do you. I know, I'm working on it. Lucas smiled and put the phone away. 3 months later, the barn workshop was officially open for business. Elena had built up a small client base, mostly custom furniture pieces, some repair work, a few commissions from locals who'd heard about her through word of mouth. It wasn't enough to get rich, but it was enough to sustain her, to let her keep the land, keep building, keep moving forward. She'd also started teaching weekend workshops, basic woodworking, furniture restoration, beginner-friendly projects. Lucas helped sometimes, showing techniques, answering questions. He liked teaching more than he'd expected, liked watching people discover they could build things with their own hands. Lily took every workshop Elena offered. She'd built a birdhouse, a small bookshelf, and was currently working on a step stool. She worked with the same careful precision she brought to her homework, measuring twice, cutting once, sanding until everything was smooth. One Sunday afternoon, after the last workshop had ended and the students had gone home, Elena and Lucas sat outside the barn watching Lily apply the final coat of finish to her step stool. She's good at this, Elena said. Gets it from her mother, Lucas said. She was good with her hands, too. It was the first time Lucas had mentioned Lily's mother to Elena. They'd skirted around the topic for months, but Lucas had never offered details, and Elena had never pushed. She passed when Lily was 3, Lucas continued. Cancer. It was fast. 6 months from diagnosis to the end. I'm sorry. Me too. Lucas watched Lily work, her tongue sticking out slightly in concentration. I didn't handle it well. Threw myself into work, kept moving because stopping meant feeling it. Lily grew up with a father who was always there physically but only halfway present. You're present now. Yeah. Took a collapsing barn and a stubborn woman to wake me up. Elena smiled. Happy to help. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun drop toward the mountains. After a while, Lily finished with the step stool and brought it over to show them. "What do you think?" she asked. Lucas examined it. The joints were tight, the finish smooth. "It's perfect, kid." "Really?" "Really," Lily beamed. "Can I make something else?" "What did you have in mind?" "A table. For my room. Elena said she'd help me design it." Lucas looked at Elena, who shrugged. "If that's okay with you." "Yeah," Lucas said. "That's okay with me." That winter, the three of them fell into a routine that felt like permanence. Lucas split his time between his own projects and helping Elena at the workshop. He brought Lily up to the barn most weekends, and the three of them worked together, building, teaching, learning. It wasn't formal. Nobody had defined what they were to each other, but it felt right in a way Lucas's carefully controlled life never had. In February, Richard Chen published his investigation into Marcus Hale. The article laid out years of predatory business practices, documented bribes, and highlighted the testimonies of multiple property owners Marcus had pushed out. The story went statewide, then got picked up by national outlets. Marcus was arrested a week later. The charges included bribery, fraud, and conspiracy. His development company collapsed almost immediately, and the properties he'd acquired through illegal means were returned to their original owners or sold at auction. Elena read the article on her phone, sitting in the barn with Lucas. "It's weird," she said, "knowing that fighting for this place helped take him down." "You started it. Other people finished it." "We started it," Elena corrected. "You were there too." Lucas couldn't argue with that. They'd been in it together from the beginning. By spring, Lily's table was finished. She'd designed it herself, with Elena's guidance, and spent 3 months building it. The finished piece was simple but beautiful. Solid oak, clean lines, perfectly level. They carried it into Lily's room together, positioning it by the window. Lily ran her hand along the surface, smiling. "I built this," she said, wonder in her voice. "You did," Lucas said. "It's going to last forever, right?" "If you take care of it." Lily looked up at him. "Will you teach me how?" "Yeah, kid, I'll teach you." That night, after Lily was asleep, Lucas and Elena sat on his porch. It had become their habit, working all day, then sitting together in the quiet, talking about nothing important. "She's happy," Elena said. "Lily, you can see it." "Yeah." "You're happy too." Lucas thought about it. Happiness wasn't something he'd pursued. It wasn't something he'd thought he deserved. But somewhere along the way, between the barn and the farmhouse and all the work in between, he'd found it anyway. "Yeah," he said. "I am." Elena reached over and took his hand. "Good, because I need to ask you something." "Okay." "I've been thinking about expanding, taking on bigger projects, maybe hiring an apprentice, really building this into something sustainable." "That's a good plan. I want you to be part of it, officially. Not just helping out when you have time, but actually partnering, building a business together." Lucas looked at her. At this woman who'd taught him that some things were worth the risk, worth the fight, worth staying for. "Yeah," he said. "I'd like that." Elena smiled, and it was the same smile she'd given him the day they passed inspection on the barn, full and genuine and reaching her eyes. "We're going to build something good," she said. "We already did." "No, we built something that works. Now we're going to build something that lasts." Lucas squeezed her hand. "Okay, let's do that." 6 months later, Hale and Carter Construction officially opened. They'd combined their businesses, taken out a small loan to upgrade equipment, and rented office space in town. It was a risk, but calculated. They had Sarah Chen referring clients, had a reputation for quality work, and had enough saved to weather the slow periods. The barn became their workshop and showroom. Elena's furniture pieces lined one wall, available for purchase. Lucas's tool collection filled the other. They taught weekend classes, took on restoration projects, and slowly built something that felt permanent. Lily helped sometimes, sweeping up or organizing supplies. She was 10 now, tall for her age, still quiet, but more confident. She'd started telling people her dad and Elena were builders, and when they asked what she wanted to be when she grew up, she said she wanted to build things too. One Saturday in October, they took on a project that brought everything full circle. Sarah called with a job offer, a barn restoration about 20 miles north of Elena's property. The structure was in bad shape, similar to how Elena's had been. The owner was a single mother, struggling to keep the land, running out of options. Lucas and Elena drove up to look at it. The barn was smaller than Elena's, but the problems were familiar. Sagging roof, compromised foundation, rot in the support beams. The owner met them outside. She was younger than Elena, maybe late 20s, with exhaustion written across her face. She explained the situation, the bank, the timeline, the impossibility of it all. Lucas and Elena listened. Then they walked around the property, examining the structure, calculating what it would take. "Can you save it?" the woman asked when they'd finished. Elena looked at Lucas. They'd had this conversation before, in a different clearing, about a different barn. They knew how it went. "Yeah," Elena said. "We can save it." "How much?" "For you, cost of materials. We'll do the labor for free." The woman stared at them. "Why would you do that?" Elena smiled. "Because someone did it for me once, and it changed everything." They started work the following week. It took 6 weeks to stabilize the foundation, replace the roof, and bring the structure up to code. Lucas and Elena worked together with the rhythm they'd developed over the past year and a half. Lily came by after school sometimes, bringing homework and snacks, making herself useful. When they finished, the barn stood solid and square, ready for another generation of use. The owner cried when they handed her the inspection approval. She tried to pay them anyway, but Elena refused. "Just pass it forward someday," Elena said. "Help someone else when you can." Driving back down the mountain, Lucas thought about how far they'd come. From that desperate first day at Elena's barn to this, building not just structures but something bigger, something that mattered. "You tired?" Elena asked from the passenger seat. "Always." "Good tired or bad tired?" Lucas thought about it. "Good tired." "Me too." They drove in comfortable silence, the mountain road winding down toward town. Somewhere behind them, a barn stood that wouldn't have stood without them. Ahead, another project waited. And between then and now, a life they'd built together. Imperfect, complicated, real. "You ever think about where we'd be if I hadn't answered your call that first day?" Lucas asked. Elena was quiet for a moment. "All the time." And I'm glad you did. Even though it was impossible, even though we had every reason to fail." She looked over at him. "We didn't fail." "No," Lucas agreed. "We didn't." When they got back to town, they picked up Lily from Mrs. Vega's and drove to the diner. The same booth they'd sat in a year ago when everything was still uncertain. This time, though, uncertainty felt different. Not like a threat, but like possibility. Lily ordered a burger. Elena got soup. Lucas ordered coffee and sat there watching them talk, his daughter and this woman who'd somehow become essential to both their lives. "Dad?" Lucas looked at Lily. "Yeah? Are we going to keep building barns?" "Probably." "Good. I like barns." Elena laughed. "Me too, kid." They finished eating and walked out into the cool October evening. The streetlights were just coming on, and the air smelled like wood smoke and fallen leaves. Lucas felt something settle in his chest. Contentment, maybe. Or just peace. They'd started with a barn that should have been torn down. They'd fought for it against corruption, against time, against every reasonable argument for giving up. And they'd won. Not because it was easy, but because they'd refused to quit. And in the process, they'd built something that mattered more than any structure ever could. They'd built a life worth keeping. Lucas looked at Elena, at Lily, at the town around them. This was home now, not just a place, but a feeling. Safety and risk balanced together. Fear and hope existing side by side. "You ready?" Elena asked, unlocking her truck. "For what?" "Tomorrow, next week, whatever comes next." Lucas thought about it, about the projects waiting, the challenges ahead, the inevitable problems that would arise. And he thought about facing them with Elena beside him, with Lily growing stronger, with a foundation that would hold. "Yeah," he said, "I'm ready." They drove their separate ways, Lucas and Lily to their house, Elena to the barn on the mountain. But it didn't feel like separation anymore, just distance between one moment and the next. Later that night, after Lily was asleep, Lucas stood on his porch looking up at the stars. His phone buzzed with a text from Elena. "Thanks for today." He wrote back, anytime. 3 dots appeared, then, I mean it. Thanks for everything, for showing up, for staying, for building something that lasts. Lucas smiled and typed, We built it together. Yeah, Elena wrote. We did. And somewhere up on the mountain, in a barn they'd saved from collapse, the lights were on. Elena was working late, building something new. Creating, fixing, refusing to stop, just like always. Just like tomorrow. Just like whatever came next. Because that's what they did. They built things. Not perfect things, but real things. Things that mattered. Things that stood. And sometimes, if you were lucky enough, and stubborn enough, and brave enough to keep showing up, those things lasted.